engineer. I'm just a person who uses things, and I don't understand a lot of what goes on in those magic boxes. I just plug wires in and hope for the best, and it works great if things are plug and play. Otherwise, it takes me a while to sort it out. But anyway, so I was thinking the other day about all the ways that my life and radio of various things have intersected, and decided to put together this little presentation here. When I was a kid, we had one of these pieces of furniture in our house, and I had no idea what it was or how it worked or anything. And I don't know if my father even knew what to do with it. It never got plugged in. But when I guess I was around junior high school, I decided it'd be interesting to plug it in and see if it started a fire or whatnot. And didn't even have an external antenna. But I was amazed at that it was possible to listen to radio stations that were half a world away, including such exotic places as Radio Moscow and Radio Havana and things like that. I can imagine now if we'd had that same radio with a long wire attached to it, how many other exciting places we could have heard. So anyway, that was back in my young days when I was spending a lot of time doing corn farming. Um, so I spent a lot of time on a tractor just like this. You'll notice on this tractor here, this advertisement featured in the ad is the International Harbor Fender Radio, and you can see it right here. That's a an AM radio. Um, at least the ones that I used was just an AM radio, and of course it was nice to have some entertainment when you're out there on the tractor. But more importantly, I thought was especially during the springtime when you're out there in the prairie and there's no all this stuff hasn't grown up yet. The corn is just being put in the ground. The seeds are being put in the ground. You may be the tallest thing for miles and miles around. And in the springtime, of course, is when you're also getting thunderstorms. And thunderstorms coming from over the horizon with their lightning can be a pretty dangerous thing. In fact, I was in a field when two brothers were hit by lightning on the crew that I was working with. And fortunately, they survived, but it's not an uncommon thing, dangerous lightning. So, one of the things we used to do is tune that AM radio between stations, and you could hear the lightning crackling over the horizon, and you could determine if it was getting closer to you or moving further away by the intensity and volume of that crackling. So that was just an interesting um, way that radio was used in an unexpected way. After graduation and after doing some hitchhiking around, including hitchhiking out here to the Bay Area and hanging out on Telegraph Avenue and et cetera, et cetera. I met some guys who were in the Coast Guard up in Oregon, and they told me all about the what they were doing search and rescue missions, and this was in the Vietnam era, and of course the Vietnam era GI Bill was going to go away once once that conflict was over, and they said you really got to get in on it, while you can. Of course, I had no money for college, and I really wanted to go to college. For one reason, because I was allergic to the corn tassels, so every fall I would just go through hell until we got the first good hard frost. So anyway, I went to the Coast Guard. The very last thing I wanted to do in the Coast Guard was electronics. It was not at all my cup of tea. But they were very desperate for electronic technicians, and so anybody who qualified through the exams that they provided was sort of railroaded into the school. So I was railroaded in. I went kicking and screaming, and they eventually said, "Okay, you don't have to be an electronic technician. But you've learned enough that we're going to turn you into a Siemens electronic watch stander, which meant I got to push the buttons and spin the dials and play with all the gear without having to understand the magic that went on inside the equipment. But one of the things, one of the things I did learn about was LORAN, which stood for Long Range Aid to Navigation. And this was a radio based, ground based system that was developed in World War II. And the basic idea behind it was that if you can imagine two stations sending out a signal, a blip, or a pulse, at exactly the same frequency, at exactly the same time. And if you were somewhere on this line between the two stations, you would receive them both at exactly the same moment. Um, if you were closer to one of the stations, let's say you're closer to station B, you would receive station B's signal earlier than station A. So that's a very so you could calculate the time delay between these two. Um, if you knew that time delay, then you would know that you were somewhere on this line overlaid on a map. Now imagine if you had a third station and a fourth station, whatever, you could triangulate yourself on these various lines overlaid on a map. Um, and of course, it make it even easier if you had one station that was designated as the primary station, and all these other stations were designated as secondary stations, and each of them had a unique look to their pulse. Um, and each of them waited to receive the pulse from station A, and then waited a very specific amount of time before sending out their pulse. And each station had their own amount of time they waited. So these were all ways to make it easier for the very crude computers that we had in the day to be able to listen to those and give you the important information for your navigation. This is what a LORAN pulse looked like if you looked at it on an oscillator. What's important about this diagram here is this envelope was extremely important, very critical to the function, and I'll get to that in a minute. But also, if you notice that at the very beginning of this pulse, we could insert a little blip here. We could insert something we called blinking Zulu, which I believe was actually just a like a CW, Z in front of here that would tell the receiver, ignore this signal. It's out of tolerance. You can't rely on it. Forget about it. And we also had a way we could insert something in here that would tell all of the civilian receivers the whole system is not working. Forget about using LORAN. And that was in a time of war, only the military receivers would be able to use that signal. They were the only ones who had the capability of reading the signal once you inserted that special code in there. So that's what the pulse looked like. So of course, all of that required, excuse me, a station in the middle of all those transmitting stations with a very highly accurate oscillator I'll get back to that. Well, I can't get back. To monitor all of those signals to make sure that they were all very precisely, within tolerance. So what you just saw there was the picture of the station where I was stationed at the LORAN monitor station, or LORAN stay, Shetland Islands. Shetland Islands is 100 miles north of Scotland and 100 miles west of Norway. And so we were in the middle of the Norwegian chain. And I'll show you that on a map here in a moment. But this, what you see here is what a navigation chart for a ship would look like. And then they would have this, they would overlay the grid, the LORAN C. We were the third generation of LORAN by that time. So overlaying the grid of those signals onto a navigation chart. What you see, these numbers here are the are depth soundings. This right here is the shipping channel going into the Chesapeake Bay. What you see here is the marking the entrance of that shipping channel. This is a buoy. This is called the Yankee buoy, and it has painted on the side NCA, and it flashes yellow every 2.5 seconds, and it has a bell on it. So that's what the ships will be looking for to find their way into the Chesapeake Bay. And they would look on the get the information from their LORAN receivers, and they would be able to look on their X and Y axis here. This is 9960Y. So I think the 9960 refers to the chain that they were looking at, a 9960X. So here's the X and Y axis, and here is the time delay number that they're looking at. So if you got these two signals, you knew you were somewhere in this vicinity. So you're on your way to Chesapeake Bay. This is just an example of what a commercial receiver would look like. And here's what the LORAN sounded like if you could listen to it on the AM. That's it. Everybody hear it? You could hear it? Yes? Okay, good. This is the station. There were 16 of us there. It was a cold, bleak, damp, remote place. It was at the end of an old World War II runway. This picture was taken after all the antennas had already been taken down. But this used to be a huge antenna field here, and I'll talk more about those in a minute. I discovered right away that the way to enjoy life in Shetland was to get off the station. Most of the guys hated it. They lived in these rooms here. They were bored to tears, and they just did not like it at all. I got off the station, lived in a 400-year-old croft house, got to know the local people, did all the drinking and dancing and dart playing, and had a great time, and actually went back a couple of years ago to see some old friends there. This is what happened later. The station now is gone. There's nothing left. LORAN became obsolete with the introduction of sat-nav and GPS, although there is some talk about reinstituting some sort of a LORAN system as a backup to the GPS, because GPS has certain vulnerabilities that LORAN did not have. What they did now with that piece of property was they built a commercial airport there. So, but you can notice that we were right at the end of this runway, and look at all this salt water around us, made for great propagation. This was our radio room. Some of you, I'm sure, will recognize some of this old equipment, some Collins radios. These were the old RIDI receivers and transmitters. You can see we had a continuous roll of paper, and then we also had these tapes. Well, first of all, we used these if we had something longer than our normal communication that we needed to send out, and we would type the message and cut a tape, and then proofread it, and then run the tape through the RIDI machine. These ran at exactly 60 words per minute, and they were very noisy. But what we had to do was every 15 minutes, what this guy is doing right here, call each of the stations in our chain on the radio and give them the information about their signal and tell them to make any adjustments that were needed. And we did that around the clock, 24/7, every 15 minutes. The primary antennas that we worked with at that time were LPN antennas, and we had three of them that used 6 towers. They were in this configuration. These towers were 600 feet tall. I was always so glad that I was not the guy who had to climb up there to change the light bulbs. This shows you the chain that we were in. The Shetland Islands is right there, so we were the monitor station. The primary station was in the Faroe Islands right here. Those of you who are into DXing probably remember last year a very exciting DXpedition in Jan Mayen, which is right here. It's up north of the Arctic Circle, and is totally what's the word? No people living there now. In those days, there was only the small group of people that ran the LORAN transmitting station who lived there. And when they took that down, there's been nobody since then. We had a station, transmitting station in Keflavik, 3 stations in Norway, and 1 in Sylt, Germany. All these stations, except ours and Sylt, were run by local nationals. It was a NATO operation. Sylt was U.S. Coast Guard, and I think that was probably just because we already had a military presence there. After the Coast Guard, as I mentioned earlier, I had an allergy to corn tassels. As much as I loved corn farming, it was time to give it up and go to school. So that's what I did. I took that GI Bill. I went to Indiana University and off to Columbia University for graduate school. I used every single penny of that GI Bill, and I never looked back. But while I was in college, I studied a few different things. One of them was East Asian languages and cultures, and I had a great opportunity to go overseas and do an overseas studies in anthropology through a joint program, and didn't really appreciate that what I was going to was a place that, I knew it was a military dictatorship, but what exactly that meant and what exactly martial law looked like hadn't really hit home. I knew I was not supposed to have a shortwave radio there, but I really wanted to stay in touch with the Voice of America, hear what's going on outside the dictatorship that controlled the media there. So believe it or not, I took a book. I got one of these little shortwave radios, and using a razor blade, I cut out a space just big enough to put this radio in it, and I carried it through the airport and into the country. Looking back on that, it was very stupid, very naive. If I had been caught with that radio, I would have been declared a spy, North Korean spy, and things would not have gone well. I don't think the embassy would have been able to do a thing for me. Anyway, I got through that. I spent a lot of time in Korea, by the way, several years, 6.5 years I spent over there. Jumping way ahead, a couple of careers and into retirement, and I decided to go cruising. This is actually my Alameda home right now. This is my 5th boat, and I decided when I went cruising that I really wanted to stay in touch with my kids via email. There's a couple of different ways you can do that using the radio. There's a free system for sailing cruisers called SailMail, and then there's also another one called WindLink, which some of you may be more familiar with. SailMail is you're only supposed to use it if you're offshore, anyway, I'll talk more about that in a minute. So I decided to go cruising. This is what my communications look like currently on my boat. You can probably spot a whole bunch of different kinds of radios here. I'm going to start with this one right here. This is called an EPIRB. This is electronic, personal information, something beacon. I may have that wrong. Anyway, this is for those moments when you have to abandon ship. And this, as soon as it goes into the water, you have a long tether so you don't lose it. It sets off a distress signal that sends a radio, a signal to a satellite. And then that satellite sends it out to the rescue system worldwide. It includes your exact GPS location, and it also sets off Yeah, a blinking light here. What's that? Strobe light on the top here. So that's good as long as the battery lasts. Um, but and it's something that I have to renew every year. And of course, it's registered to the boat, so that information gets sent to the satellite as well. This is the main radio for offshore use, and this is an ICOM M802, which is sold as a marine single sideband unit. This does not require a ham license if you're only going to use it as a marine single sideband. That's in that case, then it's a program for channels. So you just dial in your channel. If you have a ham license, ICOM will give you the secret button pushes here to unlock it, and then you have access to all of the ham frequencies. Tied to that is a dedicated GPS receiver. This is different than the GPS receiver tied to my chart plotter in the cockpit. But this is tied to this radio, which is now a ham radio. And it's also tied to this marine VHF. Oh, shoot. I'm going to have to go back. Let's see. Slideshow. It's also tied to this marine VHF radio. The reason that this needs a GPS is because it also includes a automated distress system. I can push that red button there. This radio here, I can push this red button. Either one of those will send. This will send out the signal on the marine single sideband frequencies. This will send out a signal on the marine VHF frequencies. Both those signals will include my boat registration information and the exact GPS location. I have a couple of more VHF radios. This is the old one that came with the boat. This one now is registered for international use. There are two different registration systems, so I kept this one for the international and this for the U.S. use. This does not have that any GPS data. This is a handheld marine VHF, which always stays in the cockpit with me in case I have to abandon ship or my other radio stops working. And this is my handheld ham radio. This is a remote access microphone, which I take to the cockpit and plug in out there, and it matches everything that goes on here. One of the other things that this radio is really good for is that, and another reason I bought this radio, it has a system that this one didn't have. It was too early. Called AIS and DSC. AIS is Automatic Information System. I think that's what it stands for. And DSC is Direct Selective Calling. But there's a separate antenna that listens to the transponders from ships and other large yachts that will look at all their information, their speed, their direction, etc., and even the information about the boat itself, where they're registered, the name of the boat, and it will give me a warning if they enter a designated area or if we're on a collision course, and then I can actually call them directly without raising them on any particular frequency. There are designated frequencies for the direct selective calling. So it actually sounds like a telephone ringing when you use that. But this essentially replaces a lot of what you would need a radar for. Okay. My boat, this boat has a freestanding mast, so it doesn't have a backstay, which is where normally a marine radio you would isolate 30 feet of your backstay for the antenna. This boat doesn't have that, so I had to do a 25-foot whip antenna. And you can't see, but there's a very small antenna here for the AIS system. This is the shack at home. My wife has a home in Oakland, very small home, and so I decided to put together a the shack here after I won some really nice equipment at a Western Public Service System luncheon. Some vintage equipment here that was just beautiful. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to now buy a good HF radio and set up a home station. But I didn't have much room, so I got this server rack and put everything on that. So it takes a nice, it doesn't take up much of a footprint. Using that home station, just even running on 200 watts, even if I don't turn on the linear amplifier, I'm able to get out as far away as New Zealand, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. This is just a snapshot of the reverse beacon network that we talked about a couple weeks ago, last meeting, I think. Mostly what I work with is this 6-band vertical that I bought from Howard, K6SID, when he was leaving the area. Howard had this mounted out on his deck with, with the ground into salt water. So he was able to work over 100 countries using that antenna. I don't have an saltwater backyard, so I have these 18 radials in a very small yard. They're random radials. Your best if you can, the more radials you can get, the better. And it's even better if you can tune them, but mine are just random. This is the very small backyard, and my radials are just below the surface. The longest one stretches from here to here, and it's only 35 feet. I found that burying those radials was a whole lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I experimented with all kinds of different systems and finally came up with this, just getting a sidewalk edger to create a tiny little slit. And then I used a dandelion digger to push the wire down into the soil and then used my toe to cover it up. So, and that worked. I would recommend if you try that, do it during the wet season. I have another antenna, a doublet, 102-foot long doublet, which is underneath, goes along the top of this privacy fence and turns a corner and comes down back over here. I had a little concern when I first did this if I might set fire to all these vines during the dry season. So I did some research on that, and I found that in any of the cases that have been documented of trees and vines, etc., catching fire, it was always an antenna that had a loose end, and so there was some some RF that was I guess you would use the term arcing, and so I made sure that both of my ends were around an insulator and then doubled back on themselves and well clamped, so there's nothing loose there, and haven't had any trouble. I do have trouble, though, hearing. People can hear me, no problem, as far away as Australia, New Zealand, even without my amplifier on, but I have trouble hearing them. So I decided to try adding into my system a magnetic loop receive-only antenna. So that's what that is up on the chimney there. By the way, I got a rotator here that is way oversized. That's just in case someday my wife allows me to get a really big beam antenna. But for the moment, this is all I have permission for. Still, even with that, mostly what I hear kind of sounds like this. And I'm sure a lot of you understand if you've done any HF. That in Oakland, it's an aging city with an aging infrastructure. And of course, now lots of new things like plasma TVs and LED lights that don't meet code and things like that to make a lot of noise. So that's some of the stuff I have to deal with. So with all that in mind, I am fortunate to have a very good HF radio that has some excellent filtering systems and notching, et cetera, et cetera. These buttons over here, they look very simple, But I think it's going to be a lifetime of practice and practice, practice, practice to get these to where I can really, you know, filter out all the noise. But it's great to be able to, you know, reduce your bandwidth down to almost nothing. Especially, I do almost exclusively CW work these days, so I never open it up past 100. So, and of course, with the noise reduction, the noise blanking, adjustable. Um, this is, I just can't say enough good things about this radio. I guess if I was a contester, I'd want the 7800, which just had, it's the same radio, but it has two receivers. By the way, I think they don't make this radio anymore. Just a couple things I couldn't do without, for especially working my external tuner. And this is what the control box looks like for that rotator on the chimney. Here's the thing that got me started in HF when I won these two bits of vintage equipment. They were supposed to be in perfect working order when I got them, and then once I tied them up with an HF radio, I found out that wasn't the case. But then I remembered Al Sweet, I think it was, who arranged for that wonderful tour of the Historical Radio Society in Alameda there. And I got in touch with them, and one of their members said, yeah, he would take it on, and I dropped these off at his place just at the beginning of the COVID thing. And he completely rebuilt these, and I made a donation to the club, and they work great. It's a bit of a learning curve how to tune these up and make them work for young, for people who didn't grow up doing it. But yeah, they work great. Now this is supposed to be able to put out 2,500 watts. Of course, we only can put out 1,500 legally nowadays. The max I've been able to get out of it is about 600, and it's probably because it's wired for 120 instead of 240. I think that would make all the difference in the world. Which, oh, by the way, I talked earlier about WinLink and SailMail. This is the modem that I used to try to do that. And by the way, I was never in any of my boats or any of my systems able to actually make it work. So if anybody knows the magic how to do that, please get in touch with me. I spent hours on the telephone with tech support, and we just never got it to work. But this is something I just got recently, and I'm really excited about this. This essentially takes my vertical antenna and my loop antenna, and wow, is that me or is that somebody else? It sounds like an airplane going over. Anyway, and using using a phasing and balancing, essentially creating a very narrow beam. You have, in order to do this, in order to cut out the noise, you have to be able to hear the noise with both antennas, and they need to be spaced far enough apart that you can do this effectively. But it works pretty amazing when it works well. By the way, I have two, I did put in two preamps. Those are optional. But this is just to give you an idea of what this is capable of doing. I had only been working with it for a couple of days. I knew there was somebody on this particular frequency. Whoops! Oh no, I did it again. Okay. I'm going to move it up ahead here. You'll hear some clicks, and I'm just twisting dials and turning on preamps. And you can hear that CW signal start to come out of the noise. almost miraculous. I have found, of course, CW is the most effective way to work when propagation conditions are bad. So during the pandemic, I've spent a lot of time practicing CW. The Straight Keys Century Club (SKCC) Peter KOR6R recommended that to me, and that's been a great way to know who's on, where they are, etc. And this is how I find out when I'm sending out CQ and I get someone send a note to me saying, "Don't you hear that guy from Australia? He's been trying to respond to you." So that's a pretty fun thing to do. And I just want to put a plug in here also for emergency communications. If anybody has not done that yet, I really recommend that you go through the courses that are done through FEMA. There's links to them on the ARRL site, and get certified to do emergency communications. And then also join CERT, and you can see here I am at this deployment, proudly representing ARCA and my CERT and MCOM stuff there. Yeah, they are good courses. You learn a lot, and in a time of what's the word? Yeah. Anyway, never mind. I'm going to move along here. So this is just a photo op of me doing my Thursday night from the top of the parking garage in Alameda. This is the radio I use in the Jeep. This is a great radio that I've actually done voice QSO as far away as New Jersey on one lucky day that I got a couple of bounces. And I also still sometimes enjoy shortwave. This is the radio I use now, and I have a long wire antenna. Any questions or thoughts? This is while I was cruising down the East Coast, and this little bird decided to hitchhike with me. I thought that was a fun picture.
Roger, what's your antenna set up on your Jeep?
Oh, actually, that radio has 3 different antennas. I have a mag mount for the UHF, VHF frequencies, and I have a dedicated 80-meter antenna, and then I have an automatic tuning antenna for all the other HF bands.
Okay.
Roger, what group were you with when you went to the lightning fire?
Yeah, that was Alameda CERT. That was when we went to the to the fairgrounds up there.
Oh, that one. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were actually up in the fire district area.
Oh,
okay.
oh no.
Because I know that the local CERT group over there did respond in Napa, and they had communicators and other things. I just didn't know if you responded with them and you had some liaison with them or not.
Roger, I have a quick question. I see you got the amplifier and tuner working. I was there the day we tried to make that work and it wouldn't work. What was the actual problem? Do you know?
You know, I don't know. I knew that it was something, beyond my capabilities, so I took it to him. I think that he may have replaced a couple of tubes, but no, I don't know.
Hey, Roger.
Yes.
Tom here. Am I on? Yeah. Where's your boat ported? I'm on gate 7 at Oakland Yacht Club. It looks like you're in Marina Village, according to that one slip I saw.
Yes, I'm in Marina Village, gate 8.
Yeah, well, you go by my house every day.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody grounded out there at the dump station, and I've been here 22 years, so it's always amazing. So.
You've never seen anybody do what at the dump station?
Round in the winds coming in. I've seen them getting close to get blown off towards my house, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know what it is.
It's very skinny. I try to never go into the dump station unless it's high tide.
Oh yeah, that's good. Well, we'll have to get together sometime. I got a
Yes.
42 foot, and I've had the club the last couple of years over at Aeolian Yacht Club. I'm a member there too, and we've done field day from my boat. So it's been with Ron Fitch. It's really fun.
Yes, yes. In fact, I did field day from my boat. I guess it was 2 field days ago, and that was, I think it was my first. I was doing, CW Marine Mobile, and I had my first international QSO with a guy from up in Canada that day.
Well, it's really interesting. I've got a ICOM 7000, and I've run about 80 or 90 watts through a SGT 237 to a long wire that's not on my backstay, but I've got it separate off the backstay up it's about 55 feet long. Yesterday, I was talking to a guy in Iowa, and I've got it all the way back to the East Coast and all over the United States just on that. And it's not too noisy on the water out there. Over.
Oh yeah, sure. I even well, actually, when I did the field day, I ran an inverted V up to the top of my mast, and but even without that, even with that 25-foot whip, I've seen RBN contacts as far away as Hawaii just with that whip antenna.
I have talked to Hawaii too with my long wire, so it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Roger?
Just one little incident that happened in this boat that I'm in this picture here. It was a 20-foot boat, really tiny boat, and I ended up in a really horrible storm, and the only to make a very long story short, ended up in Cuba, sort of against my will. It was the only port I could make. And of course, I didn't have any charts for Cuba because I had no plans to go there. But I did have a ham radio on board with me. Of course, there was no cell phone service or anything there at the time. So I used my ham radio to make contact with a guy in Michigan then who got a message to my emergency contact via telephone to notify my family that I had survived the storm and everything was okay.
Roger, do you have dreadlocks in that photo?
Yeah.
Is that a hat?
No, that's dreads. They got a lot longer over the years, but hey, what can I say? I was living in in the West Indies at the time.
Is that a pet bird or just one that happened to land on you?
No, that bird just was hitchhiking. Sometimes they'll do that when you're out to sea. They get tired of flying. They see something to land on. They'll just come down and join you.
Yeah, this is Tom again. I'll confirm that. I've gone up and down the coast and off to the Farallones about 25 times, and you had birds that'll come and just land. They're just tuckered out, man, and they'll just stay right in your cockpit, and you don't bother them, and they don't bother you. I didn't have them land on my arm, but it's always interesting to try to help them revive before they take off again.
I think this little bird was a little anxious about my cat that I had on board, so he was sticking close to me.
Roger, this is Jim. I had a question about the noise control you're doing using the receiving antenna. Now, do you have for the receiving side, do you have that hooked up to your loop? Is that how it works?
Yes, that NCC-2 is one side is the loop and the other side is the vertical. You have to have 2 antennas.
Right.
So yeah.
So
go ahead.
What kind of noise are you blanking out? I'm getting a lot of noise from all the solar installations going in nearby, and it's pretty noisy.
Yeah, it is noisy. I think a lot of what I'm getting rid of is directly from the apartment buildings next door, plasma TVs and things like that. But I can't be certain. I do know that around Christmas time, when everybody had all their LED lights up, that I had a lot more noise than I have now. There's a noticeable difference. But according to DX Engineering, this system will cut out noise close to you or far away. It doesn't matter. It just any noise.
A quick comment about that. I use the MFJ 1026 noise canceller. It's the same principle. I think the DX Engineering does a little bit better job at it than pay more for it. But
Oh yeah.
when those things work, when you get the phase knob and the balance knob right, you can knock things out, and it's just amazing because you're basically taking the noise and you're inverting it to 180 degrees and subtracting it out. And when it works, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful when it works, but sometimes it just doesn't seem. You just can't seem to get there.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no further questions for Roger, thank you, Roger, for your presentation, for stepping up to serve as our treasurer and all that.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I and the rest of the board greatly appreciate that. Hopefully one day I should be able to do my own presentation on my journey to DXing as well. Once I have, yeah.
How do we get a copy of this recording?
I will be able to download it off Zoom later. I can upload it to the club YouTube channel.
Great.
Okay. And Roger, you're on mute.
I said I didn't know we had a YouTube channel.
We only have just a handful of meetings on there from some past presentations. So I'll make sure you get a link. We don't list things publicly, but the links are shareable to whoever has the link. Okay. Is there any other business for the club before we finish up?
Yeah, I would like to make one quick comment for you single sideband people. This weekend is the CQ Magazine Weird Prefix Contest, otherwise known as WPX. This is a single sideband contest. It started at 5 o'clock last night. It goes to 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon. And basically, anybody that has a weird prefix, I'm WQ6X, so WQ6 is needed, and I'm remoting into November X-ray 6 Tango, so NX6. You get multipliers based on the number of different prefixes that you work all over the world. And if you want to learn contesting, this is one of the best ways to do it.
Okay, great. Are the details for that on ARRL?
Actually, it's a CQ contest, but if you go to the WA7BNM contest calendar, you'll find the entry for that contest, and they have a link to the rules. Or if you go to my Facebook page, I posted a link to the rules on my Facebook page, so anybody can have an easy access to it.
Okay, great. April's meeting topic will be Ron again. He'll be doing a presentation for us. We haven't quite sussed out the topic, or do you have something in mind for April, Ron?
Well, here's what I have in mind. Last year, I reserved the call sign Kilowatt 6 Alpha for CQP on the hopes that maybe the ARCA Club could come together for CQP, and that never happened. And they asked me to donate the call sign for the Sequoia event for NX6T. So this year, I'm going to reserve it again, and I would love to see the ARCA group put together a CQP operation, activate Alameda County, kilowatt 6 alpha is for Alameda. And I want to talk about CQP, what it is, in case you don't know, because you're missing out. And I'll show you a number of interesting things about it and discuss what we could do to actually put together a CQP station. Because, my reason for doing it, we can easily set a record for Alameda County for multi-single low power. Multi-single means multi-operator, and the record score is so low that we can beat it with our eyes closed. So we'll get a record out of all this. So I want to talk about that next month.
Okay, sounds great.
Ron,
Yes.
do you have a place to put the trophy?
No, they don't give trophies. Well, actually, if we were number one, they'll send a bottle of wine. But no, they do issue certificates, however, and you can download those from their website.
I got a place to put the bottle of wine.
All right.
If you go to the CQP results page, you'll see they showcased my station along with another from this last year's event. I took a first place for Contra Costa County. And so I'd love to see us take a first for Alameda and set a record.
All right. Great. Thank you, Ron. I'll get in touch with you later for details for the Clipper.
We'll work that out.
All right. And then May meeting, most likely we will be discussing possibility of field day. As everyone knows, Alameda, or at least California, should be open to all persons 16 and over by April 15th for the COVID vaccine. So we may be actually able to do our field day out together as a club again. So we don't know how much longer these online Zoom meetings may continue. Most likely the hospital may not let us in for a while yet, but we may at least get to do field day together this year. So that may be something we can look forward to. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your Saturday, and we hope to see you soon. Please stay healthy and stay safe.
Good meeting, Zach. Thank you.
Good meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Hey,
Roger.
everybody. Good to see you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.